Thank you for joining us for First Things First, Helping Adult Learners Make Better College Decisions, a webinar by Public Agenda. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that helps people navigate the issues that typically divide them and attain solutions that work for them. Our work includes a combination of opinion research and public and stakeholder engagement. My name is Caroline Hagelskamp. I'm the Director of Research here at Public Agenda, and I'm joined by my colleague Will Friedman, who is Public Agenda's president. In this webinar, I will first discuss new research that we conducted with adults without degrees who are seriously considering enrolling at a post-secondary institution to complete a certificate or degree program. Then Will take over to discuss the implications of our research for those who seek to help adult prospective students make wise decisions about programs and colleges they decide to enroll at. We then have a Q&A, again moderated by Will Friedman. And I also want to point out that this research and webinar have been generously supported by the Kresge Foundation. I encourage the audience to check out the full research report on our website, as for obvious reasons we're not able to discuss all the findings in this short amount of time here in the webinar. All right, so why are we doing this research now? There have been increasing efforts in higher education, government and philanthropy, and elsewhere to increase post-secondary attainment in the U.S. Part of these efforts are focusing on making more data about schools and their performance available to prospective students in the hope that more and better information will turn prospective students into smarter shoppers. We also know that the U.S. student population is becoming older, and more students than before are studying part-time. We also see more full-time workers and parents returning to college in the hope to earn valuable certificates and degrees. And more students decide to take some or all of their classes online. At the same time, though, higher education is suffering from unacceptable low graduation rates, from high student loan debt and significant student loan defaults. So given the situation, we wanted to know more about this still under-researched group of Americans without degrees who are trying to figure out for themselves whether earning a college credential will actually be worth it for them. Especially, our project was built around a number of questions. For example, how are prospective adult learners making decisions about college? What are their biggest concerns and priorities as they're reviewing their options? Where are they getting their information from? And what would help them make decisions and find colleges and programs that better fit their needs? To be clear, in this research, we defined adult prospective students as 18 to 55-year-old Americans without associate's or bachelor's degrees who say that they're considering enrolling at a post-secondary institution to complete a certificate or degree program. They're not currently enrolled as students anywhere, and they wouldn't be entering college straight out of high school. Moreover, all our participants say that it is likely that they will go back to school within the next 2 years. So in that sense, the issue is particularly urgent and imminent to them. The study consisted of a nationally representative survey of adult prospective students, and we completed 903 interviews, largely on the telephone. We also conducted Public Agenda signature learning curve research focus groups with these types of adult prospective students. So just briefly, those are 3-hour-long focus group conversations with individual follow-up interviews on the telephone. In the focus groups, we introduced participants to information about the higher education sector that was mostly new to them. For example, we talked about a range of school performance metrics, websites that allow prospective students to compare schools and such things as graduation rates and tuition costs. And we also discussed basic differences between for-profit and non-for-profit higher education institutions. Participants in these focus groups were encouraged to fully engage with this information and ask questions and deliberate the value of that sort of information. Now we're getting to some of the findings. And first of all, I would like to point out a few facts this research revealed about this specific population of adult prospective students. After all, again, we are looking at a very much under-researched group. We know a lot about high school students as prospective college students. And we also know quite a bit about the needs of college students once they enter the higher education institution. Here, however, we really wanted to know about all the Americans out there who are not yet connected to an educational institution, but are considering enrolling in one in the future and how they go about making their decisions. We estimate that 23% of 18 to 55-year-old Americans without degrees are adult prospective students, which means they're considering going back to complete a degree. An additional 5% are contemplating going back to school to take a few classes, but not necessarily complete a degree. The majority of these adults hope to earn a bachelor's degree, but only 11% want to enroll directly into a bachelor's program. This means that the vast majority of this population is looking for certificates and two-year programs to begin with. Nearly half already have some college experience, and 1/4 is already paying off student loans. One quarter hopes to complete an online education, an online degree, but 3/4 are looking to take at least some of their classes online, so there's a huge demand for online education. Moreover, nearly 60% expect to take remedial classes in college, and we were quite surprised about that high number, which indeed is about the number who will end up taking these kind of classes. We also found that about a fifth mention a for-profit school as one of the schools of their interest, even though, I will discuss later, these prospective students don't typically think of schools as for-profit or non-for-profit institutions. And now we're going to get to the more substantive finding of the research. We gave, here first of all, we gave respondents a whole battery of things they could potentially be worried about. And we found that the driving concerns are the cost of their education, particularly the prospect of taking on a lot of debt, and the question of how to combine the demands of school with their already existing family and work responsibilities. Moreover, on this graph, it's quite interesting to note that even though most, nearly 60%, are worried about keeping up academically, just 30% worry about dropping out. Next, we asked what they cared about most as they're searching for colleges and programs. And here we have some clear winners. The absolute top priority are high-quality teachers, and especially instructors who care about students. In fact, that's a theme that will come up again and again in this research. We heard over and over that these adults very much care about being taught and advised by experts who care about their success and who take their time with them. Also high up on their list of priorities are affordable tuition and the promise to gain skills and knowledge in school that are directly relevant in the workplace. In other words, most of these adults are primarily looking for practical degrees. On the next slide, you see the bottom part of the battery, the priorities battery, and the kind of things that much fewer adults care about. For example, just 22% felt it is essential that a school keeps their class size small, and even less find such things essential as the types of extracurricular activities the school offers and whether or not their fellow students are largely their age. Next, we gave respondents a list of services that are often quite prominent in college commercials and advertisement. And we asked how much more attractive they would be to a school if it offered those kind of services. And indeed, this group is quite receptive to such things as job placement services, hands-on help with financial aid application, and personal tutors. Many also say they would be a lot more interested in a school if it offered internship opportunities and if the instructors also worked as professionals in their field of expertise. These are clearly things that college marketing professionals have known for a while. And then we wanted to know where these adults are getting their information from. And this is the next battery. As you can see, they're most likely to learn about college from friends, family, and colleagues. But right after word of mouth come TV commercials, billboards, and ads. At least in this pre-decision stage, they're far less likely to say they're learning about their options from a college guidance counselor or perhaps their employer. And we think this is a pattern that we might want to see somewhat changed or reversed in the future. On the next few slides, I will show what happened when we asked adult prospective students on their views and experiences with the types of information that many higher education experts hope future students engage with before they make a college decision. So for example, we asked our respondents how important they thought it was to compare various types of school performance indicators before deciding what to study and where to enroll. But we found that barely half of our respondents felt it was essential to consider such metrics as the school's graduation rate or graduates' average student loan debt. And just 45% thought it was essential to know what types of jobs or salaries graduates get before enrolling. All of this, of course, is the kind of information that experts put a lot of effort and time in making transparent. Moreover, we found a shocking lack of unfamiliarity with websites such as the White House College Scorecard, Campus Explorer, and Big Future, all of which are designed to help students compare schools across various aspects and make more informed decisions. In our focus group, virtually no one had heard of these websites, and just 18% of survey respondents said they had used any kind of interactive websites for their searches. However, respondents who had used interactive comparative sites typically rate them very favorably. Finally, we found both in our focus groups and the survey that this group of prospective students is largely unfamiliar with the term for-profit college. 55% say that absolutely nothing comes to mind when they hear the term. And among those who have some sort of associations, we typically just got words like business or money in response. Virtually no one mentioned a specific school's name. And with this, I will hand it over back to Will Friedman, who is going to discuss the implications of this research for those who seek to better support adult prospective students.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks for doing such a great job despite fighting a cold. All right, so we're going to go into the last leg of the presentation on the question of what we feel like some of the important implications of the research are for better engaging students to help them make wise decisions. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A and interact a little bit. So as Caroline pointed out, prospective students are not always immediately interested in information that arguably they should be concerned with, such as dropout rates. And we'll talk in a moment about the importance of helping them appreciate such metrics. But that's not the place where we'd recommend people start. A fundamental principle of effective engagement is to start where people are, not where you want them to be. So we recommend that one should begin engaging prospective students around their top priorities and concerns. And in our research, you heard a little bit about that. Those are things like the jobs, is this relevant to helping me with my job and career? Has to do with, affordability and cost, teacher quality, and the challenge of balancing and scheduling work and school and family, and that whole balancing act. So we would recommend that you people who are trying to engage students and help them figure out where they need to go, start with those concerns and draw them into the conversation. But then there's the challenge of helping them appreciate things that might be relevant to their decisions that aren't on the face or immediately obvious to them. So the dropout rate is an example that Caroline mentioned, and we think it's an interesting one, and we sort of suspect that one of the things at work here is that adults have to talk themselves into a state of confidence in order to decide to return to school. So the idea of dropout rates doesn't seem to, it sort of bounces off them in a way in terms of the state they've worked themselves into. So in our focus groups, they would say things like, I'm not going to quit, so that doesn't apply to me. Similar, we've seen in other work we've done with current students that they tend to blame themselves and not their institutions for problems they're having with their progress. And that's admirable in many ways, but it also might be getting in the way of their being savvy comparative, of people being savvy comparative shoppers. So what we found in our focus, in the qualitative stuff, in our focus groups, we found it took a while for people to appreciate that a metric like dropout rates might be relevant. And once they saw that schools can differ widely on this point, and they came to understand that schools differ in the amount of supports they offer students, things like, and they started to talk it through, it began to make more sense, and they began to see maybe this, is a helpful piece of information. Similarly, we heard Caroline talk about the fact that for-profit colleges is not a familiar term nor is the concept familiar. And this was also interesting in sort of watching people come to terms with the concept, because as we explained to them the nature of the way in which different colleges are organized, governed, and funded, it did seem to be a relevant piece of information to them. We tried to explain this in very neutral terms without making any values judgments, and just allowing people to understand that they're for-profits and they're public institutions, and et cetera. And the fact that a profit motive was sometimes at work in these institutions certainly didn't disqualify any institutions, but it did lead prospective students to ask more searching questions about the colleges they were interested in, the costs associated with them, the claims they heard in advertisements, et cetera. So it just seemed to, make them more savvy in terms of asking questions and not accepting everything at face value, and they seem to find it relevant. So there's a learning curve on that question as well that may be interesting to think about. The online tools were another area that we probed, as you heard Caroline talk about. So the fact that it's not always clear to prospective students that some information is relevant is one challenge for the online tools. And it suggests that some metrics might need some supporting materials, perhaps stories that illustrate why they're important, something like that. But more fundamentally is the fact that these sites are largely unknown. As she said, as Caroline said, in our focus groups, nobody talked about these, and nobody was familiar with these. And in our survey, barely 1 in 5 had some familiarity. So, one of the questions is how to raise the profile of these sites, because as we also saw, those people who do look at them, whether from the survey data, the people who looked at them, 3/4 of them found them very valuable. And in our qualitative focus groups, when we exposed people to them and they played around with them, they talked about the results, they started to find them very valuable. So the question is how to make them better known. Now, based on our research, many respondents are not finding their way to these sites via online searches, which is one of the primary means of people getting started when they're thinking about going back to school. So, for example, White House College Scoreboard, one of the more prominent versions of examples, does not pop up near the top of many search queries that people report using, things like college search or what college is right for me. So another angle here might be to improve Google search results for these sites. We might also look at the possibility of creating more app versions, of which there are very few. We're beginning to see 1 or 2 now, but they're still rare. This is especially relevant, perhaps, because more and more poor, minority, and non-college educated people are primarily using cell phones to search the web, so this might be a promising avenue. Then finally, we might consider the use of public interest advertising. We found that one of the ways that many students learn about colleges, and especially the for-profit sector colleges, is through advertising. And we therefore suspect that public interest ads that make people aware of nonpartisan comparison sites might be helpful, especially if they grab people's attention by speaking to their leading concerns around cost and job relevance and things like that as a way to hook them in. And we'll finally say not to neglect the human touch, because as helpful and cost-effective as informational websites might be, it's also extremely helpful to people to learn about, to work through these kinds of complex decisions by engaging with relevant other folks and talking matters through. And we certainly saw that in the focus groups. And when we asked people about, what would help them, they often gravitated toward interacting with experts and current students, either in person or online, one way or another. It was clearly extremely helpful to them, and they were looking for those sorts of opportunities. So that sums up what we think are some of the salient points of the research. We would like to respond to any questions you might have. You can type your questions again into the chat box. Let's see, we have a couple on queue here. One of them is that the data shows that, I'm going to hand this over to Caroline to respond to, that 67% of prospective students are worried about taking on too much debt, but only 50% think it's important to find out the average debt of students at a school they're interested in. How do we think about this juncture?
Yeah, I think it gets to what Will was talking about, that there's a bit of a disconnect between what your worries are and how you know how to find out about your worries, or what your questions are and how to find the right answers. And especially in average student debt or average salaries is something that doesn't really resonate with a lot of students who don't see themselves as averages. So I think I would go back to what Will was saying. There's just a lot more engagement necessary and opportunities for people to kind of understand how an average might actually be informative to their decision.
Okay. An old friend of ours writes that you helped us examine this issue a few years ago in Northeast Ohio. I'm curious to learn about the disparity between the number of people who want BA degrees and the number of people who want to enroll in a BA program. What do people want to do in order to earn a BA if not enroll in a BA program? So my understanding is that they're looking at community colleges as the first step along the way to ultimately completing a BA degree. Let me see if Caroline has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would say the same. Community college or any kind of two-year degree might seem like the more attainable or more affordable option, and the BA is probably the aspiration, and then there are certain steps towards it. And we, in our focus group particularly, we noticed that these are not a group of adults who's particularly excited and to go back to college. They're mostly worried about whether it will work out for them. So I think they're going to start. They're more willing to start slowly and then see how far it takes them.
This would certainly emphasize the importance of the community college to four-year link and transfer policies and things like that. All of that's going to be extremely relevant to these folks. Another question is, how granular are the groups about students like me? Is it just older students or older students with kids or older veteran students? Well, we provided a bunch of information about the nature of the sample, but let me see what Carolyn has to say about this one.
Yeah, that's how we asked some of the questions around what they thought would help students like them to make the better decisions. That's the last battery that Will was talking about. We did break the data down in younger and older students, so under 25 and older than 25, and all that data is available online on our website together with the report. We did see some differences in ages, not so much on those questions though, and what would help them more. The older and younger people were pretty similar there. We have not looked at that data in terms of whether they have children or don't have children, are working or not working, which of course are very important categories. We did have some veterans in the sample, but not enough to break them out into a separate group. But all this data is available for whoever wants to look a little bit further into it or work with us on doing some further analyses.
Right. So looking at the data more closely, you can see which of the responses cut across all, pretty broadly across the sample, in which some demographics they were speaking, fit for that particular demographic a little bit more. Weren't able to really break it down for you that much here, but you'll see in the fuller report or on the site. So that seems to conclude our questions for the moment. We would certainly welcome you to put more questions, chat more questions in, and we'll respond, or just email us directly. We're going to provide you with emails addresses. That's happening now in your chat box.
And then lastly, I would like to point out that this report is part of a bigger research project, effort that's funded by the Kresge Foundation, and we're coming out with another report just in January on which features some of the students we just talked about and many others on higher education in the for-profit sector specifically. So stay tuned to that, or send us an email if you want to be on our mailing list for that report.
So thank you very much for your attention, and we hope you found it useful. Again, get in touch with us if you have any follow-up questions. Thanks so much, folks, and enjoy the rest of your day.